you know, if I disappear, that I have my cell phone, I could hop on the cell phone, you know, so anyway, I may disappear and come back. So just, that's what's going on.
Okay.
Okay, and how many do we need for a quorum? 4?
Yeah.
4.
We've got 4, so.
It's only 5:30. Rex is still connecting.
Okay, and can we still have a meeting if we start off with a quorum and lose somebody?
No.
You have to stop.
Not for decision making.
Not for decision making.
And we're also waiting for Emily Terrell with Cascadia. And
she's on her way in now?
She's going to be making the presentation. Oh, there she is.
And we are officially live on Access Humboldt currently.
Yeah.
It is now 5:30.
Yeah,
so
okay. Well, should we start the meeting?
It looks like Rex is fully connecting, but I will quiet myself up and let you do your thing.
Oh, there he is. Okay, so he's coming in on the phone. Are you here yet, Rex?
Yeah, I'm.
Okay, good. Welcome. All right, well, I will call this meeting to order of the Humboldt Waste Management Authority's October 8th, 2020 board meeting. And we will begin with roll call, please.
Herrera.
Here.
Castellano.
Here.
Hogan.
Here.
Wilson.
Here.
Bone.
Happy to be here.
And Sweeney.
Present. Thank you all for that. So the first item on our agenda this evening is the consent calendar. As most everyone knows by now, all matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the Humboldt Waste Management Board and will be acted upon by one motion unless a specific request for review is made by a board member or a member of the public. Is there anyone on the board that wishes to remove anything from the consent calendar? Seeing none, is there anyone from the public wishing to remove an item from the consent calendar? Seeing and hearing none, can I entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Using the roll call.
Second? Made the
Leslie,
second?
I believe.
Okay.
Oh, no, that was me.
It was Elaine.
Oh, it was
Elaine.
Elaine. Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Tyler, using the roll call, can we have our vote for approving the consent calendar?
Herrera.
Aye.
Castellano.
Aye.
Hogan.
Aye.
Wilson.
Aye.
Bone.
Yep.
Sweeney.
Aye. Motion carries. So the next item on our agenda is oral and written communications. This is the opportunity for anyone to speak on a matter that is not on this evening's agenda, or if there have been written communications concerning matters. Board members may respond to statements, but any request that requires board action will be referred to staff for review. Is there anyone that was in the public that wishes to speak on an item not on this evening's agenda?
Mr. Chairman, we have not received any emails or any requests for anyone to speak.
Okay.
Just for the record.
Yes, very good. Thank you for that. Next item on our agenda is the presentation on preliminary waste characterization study.
Yeah, well, as a very quick introduction and a little background for board members, you all recall that we had secured the services of Cascadia Consulting Group last October 10th, a year ago, almost to the day, to perform a solid waste characterization audit for materials that are generated by HWMA's member agencies. We were originally scheduled to have our first sampling done in early February, with the second one commencing in June. Obviously, with the pandemic, that season of sampling was postponed as a result of the state shelter in place. Now, that being said, we did receive some good information from that initial sampling. And so I've asked that Emily Terrell with Cascadia Consulting Group to make a presentation to the board of the preliminary data to date. That way we can then have the board receive it, and then we'll begin to circulate it to the local task force as well as member agency staff, so that they can help to start to inform future planning efforts around materials diversion activities that we're all faced with trying to meet. So I'm going to introduce Emily. She is on the line with us. She does have a presentation. And Tyler, if you would make sure that things are set up so that she can share her presentation. We do have a copy in the authorities files. And with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Emily so that she can make a presentation of the report that you have in your packet.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, I would just like to thank all of you for having me here today, and definitely a special thanks to Jill for being my partner through this study and getting us all through the unexpected hurdles of 2020. So I can go ahead and share my screen. All right, can everyone see it?
Yes, I can.
Looks good.
Okay, great. All right, so far so good. So like Jill said, my name is Emily Terrell. I am the project manager for the 2020 Waste Characterization Study, and I work for a consulting firm called Cascadia Consulting Group, and we were hired on by the authority to conduct this study. I am currently based in Seattle, but I actually grew up in Blue Lake, so this was a really exciting project for me to take on.
I bet, yeah.
Definitely. All right. So we were actually hired to complete another waste characterization study for the authority in 2010. And once this study is complete, it is meant to not only provide current data on the material composition of the garbage stream, but also provide a comparison to the 2020 data or the 2010 data that we collected 10 years ago. So this year's study did follow a very similar protocol to the 2010 study with just a few minor tweaks. One of those tweaks was adding some additional data on the disposed food waste as it relates to 1826. And we completed season 1 of fieldwork in February earlier this year, just in the nick of time before everything shut down. And the second season was planned for June 2020, but as Jill said, we've postponed it to June 2021. So we'll still collect the same seasonal data, it's just 1 year later. And the findings that I'm presenting today are definitely just preliminary. They're just based on season 1. We'll have a much more accurate data to present following the final and second season of fieldwork next June.
So the expectation is the waste collected or characterized in January, winter months could be different than in June and summer months, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
Or
yeah.
at least
so
be able to discuss and analyze those differences.
Exactly. Yeah, we tried to spread study seasons out throughout the year so we're not just collecting data from a single season.
Yeah, good.
So, ideally, maybe in a future study, we'll do 4 seasons where you get to capture all 4 seasons. But I think doing a winter and summer gives a pretty good representation of the year's waste composition.
Yeah, sure.
And so there is a report of this preliminary data. That report includes lots more detail than this presentation is going to. This tonight is really just to present the project and kind of introduce you to the project, what we're doing, and just share some very high-level findings that we found from season 1. So what were we studying? This study looked specifically at garbage from each member of the authority. And for each member, we're collecting data from 4 sectors. So we're collecting from the residential sector, commercial, self-haul, and C&D. So for this project, C&D sampling is planned exclusively for the summer season, and that's because construction activity is just greater in the summer than it is in the winter. So tonight, we don't have any preliminary data to present for C&D. That will be coming next year. And this is a very fun overview of how we actually perform a waste characterization study. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with these studies. They are dirty, and they, in my opinion, as a total trash nerd, I think they are really cool and provide lots of great data. There's really no machines that could do this for us. We hand sort all of our trash. So prior to field work, we arranged to have the commercially hauled vehicles rerouted to Hawthorne Street, and that was just to simplify sample collection. We had one of our staff was a vehicle survey that was identifying loads as they came into the facility and then routing them to the tipping floor. And that's where our field crew was able to extract a 200-pound sample from that load. And that's what you see in step 2. So our field crew photographs every sample, and then we take that sample and we sort it into individual material categories. We just do this by hand sorting. There were a total of 73 material categories for this study, I believe. And then once they're all sorted into independent bins, we weigh each material and we record that data into a cloud-based data management system. And so for this season alone, we collected a total of 96 samples across all sectors. We did this in about 7 days. And the number of samples that was allocated to each member was linked to its relative population. So for example, we collected more samples from Eureka than we did from Blue Lake. So here I will start getting into some of the preliminary findings. Again, these are just very high level findings from the data from just season 1. So they're not going to be completely representative of the study's findings until we complete another season of field work, like I said. But overall, so this is looking at the overall garbage stream over the entire authority for all members. So overall, about half of the material disposed is readily recoverable. And so that means it's recyclable or it's compostable. And remember, we're just looking at the trash. So this is the material that's just in the garbage bin. Non-donatable food is nearly 17% of the overall waste composition. And that material type is the most prevalent material in every sector. And so what I mean by non-donatable food is that food that's partially eaten or processed and wouldn't be suitable for a donation. So it is most of the food that gets thrown out in the trash. And then in the residential and commercial sectors, over 1/3 is compostable material. So clearly we're seeing a very common theme here. There's a lot of compostable material, especially food waste, that we are finding in the garbage. And this slide shows the overall composition and just how it's divided between sectors and between members. So based on the tonnage that we collected from the haulers, we learned that there's about 90,000 tons of garbage disposed annually by the members. So this shows, how much of that is self-haul, how much is residential, how much is commercial. This combined sector here is a little bit funny. This is a special sector that we created for this study, which represents material coming from Blue Lake and Willow Creek. And the reason for this is that the residential and commercial material arrived together. So we didn't have any way to differentiate the residential from the commercial material. So we just called this sector combined so that we could distinguish it from strictly residential or strictly commercial material. And as you can see, most material is coming from unincorporated county, as you would expect. Lots coming from Eureka, some from Arcata, and then much smaller amounts from Blue Lake, Rio Dell, and Ferndale. Oop. All right, this slide shows the overall composition of all members of the authority. So this is an overview snapshot. And the 73 material types that we were separating were categorized into 10 different material classes, what we call them. And each material class is a grouping of material types, such as paper or glass. So we might look at green glass, brown glass, and clear glass as different material types, but we'll roll them up into a single material class called glass. And this just makes the data a little bit easier to look at. And so as you can see, 1/3 of the overall garbage is composed of organic material. That's the green slice right here. There also is organic material in paper. So this is other organic. So again, that's mostly going to be food and yard waste. And then we also categorize the 73 material types by the recoverability. And recoverability is based on how recyclable the material currently is. So recoverable paper, that's recyclable paper. Other recoverables are things like metal or plastic. Compostable material is going to be, again, food waste and yard waste. Potentially recoverable would be something like maybe e-waste that would have an existing market, but that market is underutilized. And then problem materials would be things like dirty plastic trash bags or roofing waste, or materials that just don't have a viable market and they do indeed belong in the trash. And this shows the composition by sector. So now we're still looking at those same material classes, but we're breaking it down between residential, commercial, and self-haul. And then that special combined sector. And so again, we're seeing really high composition rates for paper and plastic. So plastic are going to be these purple slices. We're seeing quite a bit of it. Paper are the blue slices. We're seeing a lot of that. And organic material, these green chunks. So self-haul is different because it has many more inerts, which accounts for a lot of construction waste. And but even in self-haul, we're still seeing quite a bit of organic material and recoverable material. We're seeing paper, we're seeing plastic, and we're seeing some of that compostable material like yard waste and food waste. And this is the recoverability by sector. So again, we're looking at the different recoverability groups broken down by each sector. And so we're still seeing high percentages of compostable material. Those are going to be the green lines here. About 1/4 to 1/3, or even in some cases more than 1/3 of garbage is problem materials, which do not have a recyclable market. But I mean, that's somewhere between 1/4 and a half. And so that shows us that there's definitely opportunity to recover more material in the garbage stream. And it looks like it's especially compostable material, but there's definitely some recyclable materials in there as well. So that kind of concludes the presentation. And like I said, this is a pretty high-level summary. There are more details in the preliminary report, and of course, we'll have much more comprehensive findings after the second season of field work.
Okay.
And I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Yes. So, are there questions from the board?
Yeah, I have some. Are you going to go do roll call or?
Yes, we could do that. Sure. Can we go do a roll call, Tyler, for questions?
Absolutely. Pereira.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. Great presentation, great overview. And forgive me if this is in our packet. Is there going to be any way we can get a breakdown of the compostables based on the type of composting processing that would need to happen to make that recoverable? So for example, some materials, maybe vermiculture is appropriate. Something might need something more aggressive, more like commercial composting materials. So is there any way to delineate the level of composting infrastructure we would need to recover those organics?
So what it will do is it'll break it down by types of organics, and we will be able to provide the quantity. So, I mean, I think by like the type of material and the quantity of material, you guys would kind of figure out like how much capacity you would need to be able to process that material. So it'll be broken down between food, which is further broken down into potentially donatable and non-donatable, as well as several yard waste categories: leaves and grass, prunings and trimmings, branches and stumps, manures. So depending on what outlets you were exploring to compost, if you were going to, mix all that material together, we would be able to provide you with like the estimated annual tonnages.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, Castellano.
I mean, the report seemed pretty clear and detailed, and I really appreciated it. I mean, some of my questions are more about like education, but it may be early in the game to ask those questions. Just as a side, I was Director Duffy and Director Wise from Ecology presented at Eureka City Council meeting this past week. And, there's just still kind of between this report and the amount of, I think 16 or 18% of recycling is still contaminated. Though there have been education efforts, I'm just kind of puzzling about how to, of course, there's a need to create new programs, but also like how can some of these things are about education and maybe access. But I'm just curious, like if there's kind of methodologies we can borrow from that have led to changes in other communities that you've studied, Emily, or or like what have like when you've done maybe other longitudinal studies, have you found successful ways that people have addressed some of these like
yes, and I've been on the ground doing outreach myself. I actually worked at the city of Santa Barbara before I came to Cascadia, and I did do a lot of on the ground outreach. We had rolled out a commercial composting program that was fairly new, and it did require a lot of hand holding. So we hired an entire outreach staff to just basically be developing materials, developing strategy, and getting on the ground and working with businesses and supplying materials that they needed. We sort of started with the carrot and then moved into the stick. Like we gave everyone the education and materials that they needed, checks in with them repeatedly. And then when contamination levels got out of hand, we would start implementing like cart tagging systems where bins wouldn't be picked up if they were too contaminated. And, it's kind of a last resort. It's like you want education and outreach to work, but there's also methods like that you can do just to kind of whip the bad players into shape a little bit, because contamination is a huge issue, and I do not think anyone has solved the issue of contamination. Especially if you're trying to implement a new program and people just aren't in the habit of separating compost. And of course, with compost, there's a much lower threshold for contamination than, it's terrible in recycling as well, but in compost, it can like really ruin an entire load of what would have been valuable compost. So I would say it's an ongoing effort. It may never end.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, next.
Hogan.
Yeah, I'm curious, in the other studies that you've done, if there's anything that stands out for Humboldt, or is there anything unique, or is this kind of pretty standard as far as what you see across the state or the regions that you've been involved in with these types of studies?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty standard. I actually was recently just looking at some calorie cycle results, some statewide results, and it's about the same. I think the numbers that were coming out of that were also saying about 1/3 food waste in the garbage stream. So it's pretty standard. Yeah, so I wouldn't say there's any, the amount of compost that we're seeing in the garbage, I would not say is particularly higher than we're seeing it anywhere else.
Thanks.
Wilson.
Right. What is the stuff that said there's the problem area? It's about 35% on most of the categories. What are the items that make that up? Primarily.
Yes, and I will pull up the report right here because in the report we do have a list of how each material is categorized into those recoverability groups. But just to kind of give you a general sense, and actually here, let me just pull this over. Can you still see my screen?
Yeah.
I can see it. I can't read it, but that's immaterial.
Yeah, that's better.
There you go.
Right there. So here's the list of problem materials right here. So it's going to be, certain kinds of plastics, like lots of film plastics, 3 through 7s, a lot of construction debris, composite materials. You see a lot of materials that are made up of glass and metal and plastic that you just can't really recycle. Mixed residue is in there, household hazardous waste. Rock, soils, and fines, that stuff can't really be composted. There's not a lot to do with it. Medical waste, all that kind of stuff.
So at the end of the day, this obviously goes to landfill then.
Yeah, so I imagine there's things in there like household hazardous waste that probably don't belong in the trash.
Yeah, definitely.
But we're still measuring for it because we still see it.
Yeah.
Do other agencies have, other cities or jurisdictions, have they come to a place where the people sort this out better, or is it just typical of what we're doing here, that it just comes in as it is, it's trash, and it's going to stay trash?
We always see some mixed in. A lot of the other cities we work in, they have robust programs for like household hazardous waste collection. But there's some that just always gets in there, unfortunately.
All right, this is probably in the report that you gave us in our packet, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I might have overlooked it. But, I appreciate your study. I look forward to it as it evolves. It's an issue. It's not your problem. It's society has a problem. In the midst of pandemics and the fact that everything's going to burn up, if we don't stop that first, we may not have to deal with the trash. So there's some bigger fish that we have to deal with before we get back to this. But this is not a small issue.
Yeah.
I appreciate your report.
Thank you very much.
Boom.
Thanks for the report. It's pretty in depth, and it's answers most everything as you go through it, and things like this, material types and everything else. As like Frank said, we think we're telling everybody, but nobody pays attention, I guess, because we're still getting phone calls on things that people think we know about, but i.e. CRV and everything else. But I'll bring that up in a minute. So no, thank you very much, though. This looks good, and I think we're going to start seeing a lot more cans in our trash. So that'll add to it in 20 more years if we don't do something.
Well, good to take a baseline measurement now if you expect changes.
Yeah, definitely.
And Sweeney.
Okay, well, I guess the thing that jumped out to me was the high percentage of compostable or potentially compostable material. And I recall a presentation we had maybe a couple of years ago from a local group called the 4 R's, which stands for recycle, reuse, reduce, reuse, recycle, and they added rot for the composting component. And this group does kind of like school education programs. And so they'll bring in a 40-gallon can of trash into the classroom and spread it out on the floor and have the students, pick up and fill a bag and then look at the bag. And the school kids immediately know, well, here's a cardboard cereal box. That shouldn't be in the trash. That's recyclable. And here's an aluminum can. But one of the findings from that study, if I recall accurately, was 40% of the typical 40-pound trash can in Humboldt County is green waste. So I know here in Ferndale we have green waste pickup, and I think it's maybe not available everywhere. But it appears that people either can't afford that or aren't aware of its availability or aren't using it, or it's not available, because filling up the landfills with compostable green waste just seems ridiculous, I guess. So I echo other board members' feelings that it was a very informative report and some surprises and stuff that wasn't necessarily surprising. But thank you for this effort, and it's very informative and will certainly help address future policy, and we look forward to the final report next year.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I just pulled up this. This is from the report, and it's a detailed material composition overall. And so you can see here, prunings and trimmings was just 1.1%, and branches and stumps were 0. So, and I think in the winter time, we're probably collecting a lot less green waste. So we might see that go up in the summertime. But just to kind of give you a breakdown of what that compostable material is.
So most of it is food. Yeah, most of it is that non-donatable food. And I guess that's the next big issue here in California is how do we address that? And we've had some discussions on it, but again, it's going to be, a food waste bin that will be picked up presumably at the curb and can't have aluminum cans and old cigars and stuff that's not compostable in it. So we're back to, education and awareness and what have you. But thank you for that. That helps me get a better idea of what's going on in terms of the compostable.
I had an additional question, if it's possible, Chair. Have you seen anything in the other jurisdictions where they've taken the use of digesters and taken the food and turn it into gas that they can use for renewable energy?
Yeah, there are folks that are doing that. I want to say San Jose is doing that. I have never actually worked with any jurisdictions who have that on site, but it's definitely an option that cities are looking for right now. Especially
any cities our size.
Well, I know that like a few years back, I think I was an alternate on the council. so it's been a few years, but Humboldt Waste Management had a grant approved, and it was right before Jill came on board, that they were going to get this. I'm saying like $4 million to put in a digester in the Eureka area or somewhere up here, and it got waylaid because they were too busy. Whoever was the director and people in charge decided that it was just too much to pursue at the time, and they tossed it, even though this big portion of our hauling cost, it is hauling costs that we're taking this stuff to the landfill. If they were to run that through the digester, a little on that, it would get a little bit of food. I know down in Napa, they're taking the landfill and they're running, I think, 4 half-megawatt generators in a shed down there that used to be a big land and part of their landfill, but they're taking the methane gas from what they buried, and it's a mountain it's a big mountain if you've been to it. And in the things that we're doing with RCEA, and everybody's wanting to find power locally, and here we are with a third of our waste being a compostable, which could possibly turn into organic use or to the digester. So that's just a question if it's worth pursuing, or is it price prohibitive to do that?
Oh, Mr. Sweeney, I'm actually going to ask if I could respond to this real quick.
Certainly.
Okay, so Frank, I'm going to ask, I know that you've received our strategic updates, which are done yearly, and there's a section in there that addresses the anaerobic digestion project that we had been involved with. And HWMA received a grant for $200,000 in order to do 2 things. One was a food waste collection pilot project, as well as looking at the development of a digester. So we worked in concert with Recology, and they identified some 50 restaurants that generated food waste in order to see about the viability of collection and the cost, that, what kind of volume could be expected. And then there was a parallel effort in securing an engineering firm to look at a digester. So there was a preliminary site that was identified, and the study was completed in late 2013. And the information was presented to the Eureka City Council because they were the member agency that was having difficulty in meeting their AB 939 reduction. And so we couldn't proceed with the development of an anaerobic digester unless and until there was a commitment by our member agencies to establish curbside collection and change their franchise agreements so that there would be that collection, and that the material would then come to HWMA. The city of Eureka took a look at the preliminary cost for collection. They didn't have cost for processing yet because we didn't have commitments, and or even the rest of the infrastructure site. And because the Eureka City Council at that time said no, and none of the other member agencies were, interested in pursuing this, it got put onto a back burner. So Eureka City Council directed their staff to continue looking at alternate ways to be handling food waste. So now I'm going to kind of bump a little bit over to the local task force. So the local task force is the entity that is charged with the coordination and planning of regional kind of diversion activities. And in some of the conversations that have been held, since that time, most of the entities said, we want to focus on the low-hanging fruit. Let's be encouraging people to do more food waste reduction, purchase only what you need instead of having material rot in the fridge because you don't get around to it fast enough. Practicing backyard composting, supporting vermiculture, or for some of the restaurants, in particular in the Arcata area, they had some contracts with some local farmers, that they would bring them food, and that they were able to take back the food scraps from the back of the kitchen, not necessarily partially consumed food, and then they could compost it on site. So that is as far as things have gotten with development of a digester. So unless and until, and this is part of what you're going to see in that strategic plan update, unless and until there's a commitment by the member agencies to essentially establish the service so that there would be the collection, and they would identify where that material is going, whether it's going to HWMA or if it's going somewhere else. We don't have flow control over that material unless it is given to us by the member agency. And so there's a pretty significant investment of both capital and the development of that infrastructure. And so that's where things have been in sort of suspension. One of the reasons that I think that the study is really important is we have the data from 2010. And in those intervening years, there has been this desire to, let's see if we can go after the lower hanging fruit. So part of this study, I was, didn't want to call it out explicitly, but one of the things that I was looking forward to see is, are we seeing that education and outreach and promotion, so that people are, actively practicing this, is it having a measurable impact? The answer based on what we're seeing today is no. It's not. And so I think this is going to be really interesting for the local task force to take up. The other thing I want to note, Emily, for your edification, is that I think that the green waste in particular is probably not that high because we do green waste collection. So we're not going to see a whole lot of that material come in unless somebody has put it into their bin, or if it's incidental, being primarily that it's got contamination of dirt or it's another material that is not compostable. So by and large, our cost for composting green waste is $90 a ton. So why would you want to pay $155 to drop it into the garbage when you can pay $90 a ton and drop it in the green waste? So we've been trying to keep that sort of incentivized around that green waste. And it's a really important program that a lot of people do support. So, the question of, organics and organic processing and whether it's done through composting, vermiculture, or anaerobic digestion is something that all of the agencies, I'm looking to our elected officials, really need to have more pushing on staff, because you're just not seeing any viable efforts coming forward. So when we go to these local task force meetings, it's sometimes a bit of a challenge because we've kind of had some circular conversations for a number of years.
Who composes the local task force?
The local task force is comprised of representatives that each city manager from each city designates. So we have 8 members on the committee, and each one of your city managers designates the representative who serves on the board. For Rio Dell and Ferndale and Blue Lake, because y'all are very small communities, it's your actual city manager that serves on the committee. Okay. For the city of Arcata, it has been Julie Neander. For the city of Eureka, it has been Miles. And for the county, it has been Tom Matson.
That's the agency I thought. That's who I thought it was comprised of, was the city managers, and they meet on a quarterly basis or something?
They're supposed to meet on a minimum of an annual basis, but I don't want that to get confused with the executive committee, which is also comprised of all the city managers and the CAO.
All right, I'll leave this alone. Could you forward me that study?
Sure. The strategic plan update. Sure. Yeah. I can get that done after the board meeting.
I've got it, but I don't know where it's at.
Sure.
All right. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's a good question, and thank you.
Michael?
Yes.
And if and Jill can verify this or not, it was pretty elaborate, but the other thing is we did not have the volume, even though we have a lot. We did not have the volume to cover the electricity cost. They are very cost prohibitive to run if you don't have the volume. The county was not going to run to Garberville and have a separate truck for that. And so the collection was a big thing, but the electricity, they're very expensive to run, and it didn't come anywhere near penciling out, if I remember right. And I'll turn to the executive director on that.
And I would say that I don't know that we were able to get to that level of detail. We did circulate an RFP, and there were a number of proposals that had been submitted, but because we couldn't get the final tonnage estimate, it was part of what we needed to evaluate to determine what was going to be the most viable process to move forward. You're not wrong in terms of the cost. But there were also some lower tech approaches, including windrows and things like that.
So what about hog farms? They don't require electricity.
No, they don't. So you still have an issue of collection of the material, and then of course, when you're talking about hog farms in particular, there are some foods that they're going to eat and others that they're not, and you would have to make sure that it was properly sorted so that somebody throwing your utensils or other materials that the animals could eat, that would be just inherently problematic. So, but yeah, so sorry to kind of step on Emily's toes on that a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that y'all were aware of those more local efforts.
No, I appreciate that. Okay, any other questions or comments from members of the board?
I see Gary Penning raising his hand.
I just want to comment that.
We can't hear you, Gary.
Oops, did I can you hear me now?
You're very, very quiet.
About now?
You're quiet, yeah.
In particular for farms.
Get it closer, speak louder.
Can you hear me?
Now, better.
There you go.
All right. For hog farms, swine contract the same disease as humans. So if you are going to feed food waste to hogs, it has to be raised to a temperature that kills all pathogens. So it's not just a matter of going out and slopping down the hogs anymore, which we used to do 60, 70 years ago, where all the food waste used to go. So
right.
Only learned that from dealing with it in Oregon.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. No, thank you for that information. It's helpful. Any other comments from board members or other participants? Okay, well, let's move on then. Thank you, Emily. We again appreciate your efforts in this report, and look forward to the second sampling season and the final report.
Yeah, I look forward to it as well. Thanks again for having me. And like I said, I have a personal interest in this project, so it's been a lot of fun.
Good.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you again, Emily.
Yeah, the next item on our agenda is board member reports. Are there any board member reports? Can we go down the roll call with that, please, Tyler?
Herrera.
Nothing, thank you.
Castellano.
I already mentioned that Director Duffy and Director Wise from Ecology came to the City Council meeting this past week. In regards to this past report, and maybe a larger scale question is, I do feel like some of these challenges we face with waste may require something like a larger kind of meeting or symposium or something to really kind of wrestle with the problems at some point. And maybe after we get the second report and some analysis and comparison over the past 10 years, it may be worth holding some sort of special meeting specifically to address this. That includes the local task force as well.
Yeah, good idea.
Hogan.
The only thing I have to report is that I'm also the representative for the League of California Cities, and they're doing their annual conference right now. And so there is a workshop I'm going to tomorrow on AB 1383. dealing with food waste and the aggressive reduction targets and kind of what cities and jurisdictions can do about it. So I will attend that, and I'll be happy to provide a report at our next meeting.
That would be great. Yeah, super. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wilson.
Oh, I'm good.
Bone.
Yeah, can we talk about CRV for a minute?
Sure.
My favorite thing. So I was on the phone with Senator McGuire today, and I was on the phone with talked with Cal Recycle, and Senate Bill 458 allowed for pilot programs, and they are, until we get an application in for a pilot program, we can't ask for variances. They said they would help us to a certain extent fill the application out. They also said that they were holding a couple for rural. Didn't say for Humboldt, but they mentioned, it's been mentioned, McGuire mentioned Humboldt is well known as being the leader on this. And then AB 54 allows for underserved areas to get this. Well, they've allowed Culver City and San Francisco both have these pilot programs. There are 2 left. They come with $1 million with it.
Up to.
Is there any reason? Because I've been telling people to call our state reps to get this straightened out. Well, I got an earful about telling them to call state reps because they've worked with Cal Recycle and the interim director to allow us to fill this, or at least attempt to try to get one of these programs so we can move forward. I mean, I definitely get the idea that we're not wanting to go forward. I hear personnel, I hear size, I hear everything. But I'm averaging 12 to 16 phone calls a day. That doesn't include emails and texts on CRV. And I don't know what everybody else is getting. It's not a very popular subject. And I'd like to know if we could try to get one of these pilot programs to work up here. And if we can put in there, we can't ask for anything till we get accepted. But it sounds like they're getting enough pressure from everywhere that they would probably work with us. Mm-hmm. We're hearing, I'm hearing we don't have any opportunity. We're just going to suspend it. Do what you can. And people don't understand there's no profits in this. They think we're just saying this so we can take all the cans when they send them in for free, get none of their nickel back, and we're all going to have our retreat in Hawaii. People are mad. I mean, I had last Monday, I sent Jill a picture, I think, 3 bags of cans dumped on the front steps of the courthouse Monday morning. Well, they were actually dumped Sunday night. I happened to be in here. Somebody just said, screw it, I'm going to have somebody. I don't know if anybody's checked their neighborhoods. Nobody's picking up cans. Cans are everywhere. We started this program in 1986, both for the recycling, the littering, and give an incentive. And it was always a quote unquote, did better than lose money. Now it's not doing that with staffing and COVID and everything else. Is there any way we can relook at this, put an application in for this $1 million pilot program to see if it'll work? Because it's working in San Francisco County and City for 780,000 people. I'm wondering what our 136. And I looked back at the original JPA. Recycling wasn't considered, but all the member agencies had to turn in their garbage. And then they addressed recycling after, because only a couple of the cities, Arcata was the leader in having a recycling center. So I don't know if anybody's noticed, and I made a point to do a drive around. There's a lot more cans on the side of the road where the guys used to stop and pick up the cans. And people are tossing them again. They're going into our landfill. I don't know. I voted no last month to do this, and I'm still wondering why. If somebody can tell me this is the best we can do, just send it to the dump and we'll take care of it for you. You don't get your nickel back, I'm fine. But we have people to answer to, and I think we can do better. Maybe not. I just feel we can do better. Yeah,
Jill, can you update us on the pilot study program. I know you've had some conversations and discussions along that line as well.
Are you finished with board member reports? Because
well,
that item is clear. That because I have all that. I've had the activities that I had been involved in up to last Friday, and there have been more, and so I've included that in my ED write-up already. And okay. I do address the pilot project, and so if we want to finish with the board members, and then we can do my ED report, and I can give you all the information at once, because there have been 2 additional meetings that I've had yesterday and today.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I'm next. Well, Rex has more.
And I'd like to just add, if somebody else wants to get in with Jill, the ED, Cal Recycle and McGuire would be willing to hold a conference call next week to see where we are on maybe doing an application. I just got off the phone with McGuire at 4, and maybe with the ED report, maybe Jill has talked with his office since then, but we're not picking them up. We're making a mess. And the whole idea in 1986, was to keep it off the streets, and it's not staying off the streets and out of our landfill.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm next in terms of director reports, and I can echo Rex's observations. We have a number of recycling cans, the usual trash and recycling bins that are kind of together. And historically, Public Works in particular would, I don't know the exact schedule, but on a regular basis, they would empty both the garbage and the recycling side of these combined receptacles. And over the last several weeks, if not months, they've been filling up. The recycling side has been filling up and overflowing. And we finally figured out, well, it's because people used to go in there, at night, I guess, and take out the CRV stuff and take it away. And so, that we just have much more capacity to refill the thing. And now they're not doing that. And so that's a pretty, clear result of what Rex was just speaking to, that a lot of people are just kind of giving up and putting it in the trash or dumping it on the courthouse steps or whatever. So those are my comments. So Jill, go ahead and let's start your executive director's report, and we can pick up on that.
I'll ask you to be patient. I'll ask you for you all to be patient on one thing first, just because I don't want to forget it. It's a really important one, which is the solid waste task force. You'll note that I have the date, which is scheduled for Monday, October 12th. When we were having the conversation, it was tentatively scheduled for 2 o'clock. It is now set for 9:30 on Monday, October 12th. So if folks are interested in the local task force, please contact the City of Eureka's staff in order to get the call-in information and whatnot, because those meetings will be handled remotely. So relative to after the meeting on the 10th, we did wait for a week for Cal Recycle, because they had told us that we would have a determination around the appointment concept, and we never actually heard from them directly. I heard from Senator McGuire's office that Thursday, and we had a meeting with McGuire's office on Friday, September 11th, and then we had another meeting with Cal Recycle on the 24th to talk about the pilot project program. One of the issues with the pilot project program is that it's going to require a jurisdiction to help with the proposal. They basically have to sponsor the proposal. HWMA is not a jurisdiction. So I just want to let you know, it's not as simple as HWMA just fills out the paperwork and gets it sent off. So we met again, I met with Del Norte County's Hambro representatives, Dave Slagle and Randy Scott, on the 18th. We had a really good discussion. And so we talked about potential sites if they were to open up some, basically like a satellite concept, if they were to put in some places. So they came down here that weekend, and I sent them information in terms of tonnage that we typically would have flow through our facility. And of course, the difficulty there is the numbers that we have predated the closure of Humboldt Sanitation's McKinleyville site and Fortuna's, and Recology's Fortuna and Redway sites. So whatever tonnage numbers I was giving to Hambro, of course, is going to be wrong straight out the gate. There's such a backlog of material, number one, and we know that there's a lot more demand for those services. So it was kind of take it with a grain of salt, knowing that it's going to be considerably more data. So they took that information and they took a look at what would be necessary. I spoke with Dave Slagle a week ago Monday, and he indicated that they were going to start walking back their interest level. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm also aware that there is some erroneous information that has been posted onto one of the blogs that a couple of our board members have received information about, that, HWMA is not interested in supporting Hambro coming in. We would love it if somebody wants to come in, because we're not going to be able to solve this, with just, one regional processing facility. It really needs, in order to be convenient and accessible to all Humboldt County residents, to have multiple options. So I am aware both Sophia and Leslie received those emails, and the irony is that I had just received another request from Hambro on Wednesday morning to have another conversation with them, and so Eric participated in this along with Bigfoot Recycling. They operate a series of redemption collection centers over in the Shasta County area. I was really hoping that maybe they had run some more numbers working in concert with each other, because this is all that Bigfoot Recycling does. They don't handle trash. They're not handling solid waste or, hazardous waste or anything else. They focus purely on the collection of CRV. The conversation we had today, it was really informative. They're really struggling with Cal Recycle. They're really struggling with getting their state representatives to respond. And bottom line is that they don't believe that they can afford the financial layout that it will take to secure a site. The setup is going to be pretty nominal because they're looking at portable carports, but then to staff and manage and make sure that they've got the cash payout, because recycling centers front the cash payouts and then they have to wait until the sale of that commodity material. So you have to be able to hold that money in play. So their upshot was, they would like to continue, working with us to see if they can help in any way they can. There were a couple really interesting things that we talked about that if we end up going back into this path, there might be some cost savings that we were able to identify today. And we just have to be able to run numbers and see what that actually looks like. So we had more meetings with Assemblymember Woods. Assemblymember Woods came to our facility, and Michael Sweeney was present so we could take a look at the site. He readily acknowledge that for our facility activities and our space constraints. And then we also discussed just some of the general challenges around providing CRV redemption, services. So then we had another conference call with staff from Cal Recycle, McGuire, Woods' office, and HWMA specifically to talk about the CRV pilot project and whether an appointment-based structure would be a viable proposal. So the difficulty that we're having right here is, first, they've got 5 pilot proposals. They will fund up to $1 million a year. They have 3 slots, and they have 4 projects that are under active consideration right now. And that's Cal Recycle. So what we wanted to know is, what are the metrics that you're using to determine whether a project would be competitive for that funding? We were never able to get an answer to that, because appointments, we're only looking at being able to handle between 40 and 100 appointments per day, and that's not going to get us through this big hurdle. So Rex, when you're hearing that there's some reluctance on the part of myself, it's more in the sense that taking appointments at the Eureka Recycling Center is a temporary Band-Aid, and we really need to have a more holistic and broader approach so that we can actually meet the demand for the services. So before you respond to anything, let me continue. So the next piece was I then received an inquiry on Monday about a meeting for yesterday with another interested party who was interested in potentially venturing into CRV redemption certification. And I'm not going to say who that party is. Rex, I believe you know who they are, but it's really important that people have the opportunity to ask questions and to kind of figure out if it's going to be viable for them before people start contacting them and saying, hey, you know, this or that. And so I want to hold some of those conversations in some confidentiality around that. So we had a really good conversation.
I didn't mention them.
I'm sorry?
I didn't mention them.
Okay, I know. So we did have conversations with them and information that we could provide to them, which we've provided information to them. It sounds like if they end up going down this route, it's something that could be really great to helping to diversify the number of collection sites that would be then available, you know, in Humboldt County. So I've got another meeting scheduled tomorrow with with Senator McGuire's office, and then there's going to be another meeting next week with Assembly Member McGuire, Woods, and I believe Cal Recycle, you know, office too. So, you know, as we're going through all of these, you know, we are able to see a few things, and here's where I have to kind of dance a little bit. And Rex, I'm going to need for you not to say yes or no, okay? Because we can't make decisions on an ED report. If we're going to be looking at doing something like this, there's a couple things that you need to know. And that is, there could be a way that we could look at multiple satellite sites where that material would then be collected in various locations and then get brought to us. And then we could theoretically do all the baling and figure out where we would store all this material till we could get it to market. There's a lot of moving parts around that. If it has to be subsidized, it's going to be subsidized on our solid waste fee. It's going to affect our trash customers' cost. That is a big discussion for the board to have. The other one is the CRV service that we have provided is a service. It's not a program. If we move it into a program, there's going to be a whole corresponding need for the development of additional staff, securing sites, equipment, and more cost. You don't see me putting that into a pilot project right yet in any sort of a proposal, because that's a conversation that the board needs to have. I'm not going to obligate to either the level of service or a potential cost in a grant application until I've had a chance to get you guys something which is a functional proposal to respond to. So I'm still trying to collect the data. I'm sorry that I can't make it happen any faster, but I will tell you that every day has been consumed with CRV to the tune of my not being able to get regular administrative and management functions done. So we are working on this. We are really working on this very closely. And I'm going to be talking, I hope, to our folks in our member agencies, you know, around maybe some sort of assistance they can provide to us as well.
Okay, thank you, Jill. Any questions from board members using the roll call?
Herrera?
I appreciate sometimes that I have to go first. Right now, I feel like I need to digest everything that you just shared with us. All the updates. No. But I think really my question is, given, like, just thinking about timeline for we as a board, if we are able, that we want to be able to respond quickly in potentially submitting an application depending on how things are coming into play. So really my question is, you know, what flexibility do we have on the deadline for submitting an application? And how do you see that kind of overlapping with maybe getting some framework together that for us as a board that we can have a discussion about in perhaps a special meeting?
So underneath, I'm sorry, I can't recall if it's AB 54 or SB 54. So forgive me.
SB 458.
Actually, I think I have it in my report.
January
Yeah.
January 2022 we have.
So it's 5 programs per year, up to $1 million each. I should say pilot projects per year. So 5 pilot projects per year, $5 million each is what was designated. So the next grant funding cycle, I don't even think they're calling it a grant funding cycle, to be honest. The next cycle is going to then kick in January. So they're currently evaluating 4. I don't know what the process or what the status is of those 4. They would not disclose who the remaining 4 proposals were from, other than the 3 that they have currently provided. So like I said, there is a possibility of up to 1 million through June of 22. And I haven't had really, I mean, I just told you guys out loud basically where we were kind of, starting to land on this afternoon based on all of these conversations that we've been having and trying to identify what kinds of opportunities and constraints that are out there. These things typically do take time. And it would be ideal if we don't have just a singular location, but multiple locations. Otherwise we just really deal with a lot of traffic impacts. So finding a way to diffuse, the number of customers coming in is going to be really important.
So I guess just as a follow-up, so it sounds like they're willing to work with us perhaps on getting an application in.
The application is really straightforward. That's not the issue.
So my follow-up question though is recognizing that, a week or 2 weeks from now, a month from now, we may not have some fully fleshed out, like detailed, like here are all the pieces coming together. But if there is something that we can submit, and then is there an opportunity for us to work with Cal Recycle, Senator McGuire's office, and Assemblymember Wood's office to adjust that application if it's let's say they approve it, that we can make adjustments based on how things are coming into place?
So the answer to that is I'm not entirely sure. I did speak with one party that submitted an application, and what they said their experience has been is like whack-a-mole. So they've, answer questions and then they get 7 more questions. And so I think the ability to refine over time may be a very real possibility in light of what this person has told me, but I really don't know. I mean, it's been really difficult. The individuals that have participated on the call are not the people that are managing the grant. The people who have participated have been the acting director, the legislative affairs analyst. And so, we don't have the people that are, familiar with the nuts and the bolts. And when we've asked questions, Eric, our director of operations, has had more relevant and accurate information than their staff has had on these calls. So that's been a bit frustrating. Yeah. You're on mute.
No,
yeah, you're still, okay. There you go.
Thank you. No.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
My questions.
Okay.
Castellano.
Firstly, thanks for all of your work on this. I'm curious if you've considered or if it might be interesting to consider collaborating with one of these other recycling organizations on a pilot project. I don't know, if in your conversations you found that maybe there's some new kinds of opportunities here that could be fleshed out.
Kind of what I was hoping I was going to hear today in these conversations as far as a willingness. And that's not what the takeaway was. I don't think the door is closed. I think that the big concern is going to be both, I mean, even if you were to get the financial, investment taken care of, there's still the issue of managing. there's still the issue of who's fronting the $10,000 a day that you're putting into a cash box so that it's being paid out, and some of the security things. So there's some logistical concerns that they have. Maybe there's a way that we can get a proposal, together, but that joint conversation with the three of us was more productive than the prior one that I had. I mean, it was a really good conversation, but it wasn't quite as detailed as the information that we had today.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that the funding from the pilot project might be able to address some of those concerns, or no? Okay.
We're currently subsidizing it to the tune of $673,000 a year. Yeah. And what it's going to take to change this is that the commodities market improves.
Yeah, for sure. And then, like Sophia mentioned, I would be open to a special meeting if that, made sense for the timing of this.
I would have no hesitation if I'd had something earlier in calling a special meeting, because we certainly recognize the importance. We're still trying to collect information and trying to get a sense of what would be viable, because again, this has been a service that HWMA has provided. It's not a program, and certainly larger than that is going to require some discussions around that.
Thanks.
Hogan.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot of information, and I really appreciate all your work on it. I guess when I'm thinking about a pilot program, it sounds like some of the conversations you're having will maybe lead towards sort of a more, something more than just us doing appointments, which in my mind isn't really an innovative pilot project, let's test it out,
Right.
So I'm hoping that if we were to submit an application, that it would be something sort of thinking outside of the box and more innovative, that involved, like you said, satellite sites, or some kind of, I don't know, different methods of doing the collection that were a little more innovative and maybe more appropriate for a pilot project, even though we don't know what the metrics are that they're using to judge the application. I would just imagine that perhaps they're looking for something a little bit more outside of the box. And obviously I'm all supportive of a special meeting and am available. So just keep us posted, I guess.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Wilson.
Yeah. So this is a service. This has always been a service. Is that correct?
It's a little bit of a complicated history.
I don't want a long.
Yeah, no. I get that. HWMA agreed to operate a Eureka drop-off service for Eureka residents when we purchased the property, and then we had a contract with the Arcata Community Recycling Center, and at some point, and it's not clear to me when they added that service. So when HWMA opted not to renew the contract in 2009, one of the questions that was posed to the board was whether they wanted to continue that CRV collection service. And at that time, it required a subsidy of between $50,000 and $100,000 a year. So the level of conversation, because there were 10 other CRV collection sites, just didn't rise to the same level of conversation that we're having today. So I hope that background kind of explains, when we undertook this, we were one of, I think, 5 or 6 locations in Eureka alone, and there were others that were located around Eureka community, but they've all gone out of business because the commodities market has continued to decline. HWMA has seen a corresponding increase with how much we're subsidizing the CRV. And I'll just point out that what it means is we're charging people essentially 10 cents to give them back a nickel.
Is that by way of the solid waste?
That's correct.
Yeah, and that's where a service turns into, $250,000. I mean, $750,000 is a weird service. Do we have to have, as Rex said, do we have to have a what do you call it, a jurisdiction, one jurisdiction that applies for the permit, or is that?
Yeah, it would be basically that a jurisdiction would sponsor the permit. I don't think that that's going to be any sort of, constraint, but I want to make it really clear. It's not HWMA just running forth and submitting an application. There's going to have to be some coordination with our member agencies. And I know that one of the questions is going to be is how much is this going to cost? And is it going to affect our trash customers? And those are questions that we have to be able to answer.
Right. And I guess you have to get those. And if, okay, I'm sorry. I wasn't aware that there was these other permits, these other fundings that were available. And I've got a bunch of questions, but I think I'm just going to turn this into a frustration of it's not going to go away.
Correct.
And I'm this guy that has this concept that society is going to have to foot the bill on this particular one that the state has broke their system, and they're throwing it back at the county and the city to fix this because they're not doing an adequate job whatsoever. So we can cry about that for however long we want to cry about it. It doesn't make the problem go away. I am frustrated that I actually saw a comment from another council member in an entity that voiced what Rex said, that they think HWMA is just trying to figure out a way to get free cans so they can sell it and make this extra money. And the information's been out there telling you that that's not the case. The fact that the entities don't get any money other than selling the scrap, which is worth a fraction of what they're paying for it, and you say there's $10,000 a day that you're going to have to spend just to make this thing function. So you've got to have a pretty good cash flow to function so you can lose a bunch of money.
And that's really a bigger question that the board would have to wrestle with when that time comes, and realize that that's not something that's going to be in perpetuity. That's going to be reflective of what's happening within the recycling market itself. As material values go up, then any sort of loss obviously goes down. What I presented to council on Tuesday evening was, if you were to bring in a pound of aluminum cans, we would pay you $1.65 for that pound. We take that pound of material and we then sell it on the scrap market, and it's not a material that receives some processing fees from CalRecycle. So it's just the scrap value alone, and the current pricing is 40 cents a pound. So we're not even able to recoup our cost of the CRV payout at this juncture. Last month, when we had this conversation, the price valuation of aluminum for 1 pound was 32 cents. And so, we've gone up a little bit of money, which is great. Maybe it's indicative of something that's going to be a new trend. But then, of course, we have our labor cost, we have our equipment cost, we have our overhead, and then we still have to ship it to market. And that's for aluminum, and that's the highest valued material. If you want to take a look at water bottles, if you wanted to redeem your pound of water bottles, HWMA would pay $1.28 to the consumer redeeming that container. We then take that material and we bale it, and we are able to sell it, and we're making 8 cents a pound.
You sell it for 8 cents?
We sell it for 8 cents a pound. That's the current commodity pricing on that material.
And we pay $1.28 for it.
I'm sorry?
And we pay $1.28 for it.
Correct. And, so if you've got space in which to store materials so that you could kind of work the phones in the background and figure out, let's, hey, look, we can get 45 cents if we commit today and we get it onto a truck and get it to market. You might be able to play the market a little bit that way, but we don't even have the ability to store material. As soon as we've got material, we're sending it out because we don't have sufficient storage space. And so it's part of the way that that recyclers are constantly trying to juggle, the system normally. So when those prices are more robust, it's a non-issue. You might maybe not make as much money as you would have, but because it's operating actually in a deficit, this is what we would need to have a conversation with the board around, in terms of the willingness to recognize you're going to lose money, and that we're simply going to turn around and charge people at their trash can, and they're already paying for curbside recycling. So
I get it. I
just
get
a
it.
lot of moving pieces there, and so if I didn't care, I would say, okay, let's just do this. We're just going to throw money at it, and we can solve the problem. But I really want to make sure that everybody has their eyes open as we're going into this, and frankly, consumers. I mean, it's been a pretty big shell game that got put into place, not intentionally, but I think it's what happened through legislation that was passed in 1986.
I'm going to jump out of this. I get it. It does need to, a thing that does need to come to the board, I think, and have a showing of what the actual financial give and take is, that how much you're losing and how you're going to recoup that, and what it's going to cost the people in the long run. But I don't know how you get that out to everybody. So I'm going to jump out of this and let people with more clout and understanding than myself comment. Thank you for the clarifying what you have.
Well, I guess we just tell the people we can't do it because we don't have the people, we don't have the money. And I asked at the beginning of this if somebody would join me in a meeting with the executive director, with Ken Del Rosa, the interim director at Cal Recycle, who doesn't administer the grant program, but he is the acting director. So I bet he has some influence. Mm-hmm. And if somebody would do that with Senator McGuire or Rebecca Washburn, because I talked to Senator McGuire and Rebecca today at 4:35. They're pretty frustrated that they're getting calls from Humboldt, because that's what we were told to do, to call our state reps. And they're saying Cal Recycle will work with us. They won't fill it out, but they will work with us. Mm-hmm. And I said a month ago, the appointment, I think the appointment schedule is the craziest idea I've ever heard, because who's 1010, who's 1015, who's 220. I still think in a lot of big areas do this, the alphabetical A through J, J through whatever, and everything else. And then every person in the alphabet gets 2 days a week to recycle with the day off in their force. I think and you go by the name on the registration of the vehicle bringing it in, or an ID if it's going to be our walkers. But if anybody's interested, so we can get the whole story, so we can lay all this out and just say, we don't have people, we don't have money. I know the $1 million will help. We charge $10 a ton now to offset our recycling program. So we get, how many tons we do last year.
For CRV, 1,000. So
no, we charge $10 a ton for our garbage, right?
Correct.
For recyclables.
Yes.
To cover our recycling program.
964.
And were we 85, 90 tons? 800. How many tons did we have last year?
Total tons for CRV and non-CRV was 4,500.
No, for garbage.
We budget for 75,000. One of the questions that we had for the report that you just received from Emily showed 90,000. We think that was over the course of a calendar year. So, I would go ahead and stick with the 75,000 because that's what we're budgeting for.
So we get between $750,000 or $900,000 a year to help our curbside recycling and a lot of those things. I'm having a hard time telling people, and if you're okay with it, I'll just tell people we just can't do this. We've done everything we can. We're looking at people coming in sometime as we dump this stuff in. Or I would love to be in the conversation and hear what Cal Recycle's saying and McGuire's office.
They're waiting for us to develop some sort of a proposal, and so we're trying to get information to see if that's something we can do. We know that they will evaluate it.
It's not the way I heard it, Joe. I heard they want to talk to us about us putting in an application.
Right.
And you're right. It's just a pilot, so it's only good for 3 years or so. I think that gives us time to develop, rather than I'm going to talk to Slagle, I'm going to talk to Big Bear, I'm going to talk to these guys that think it might be a good idea and bet on commodities.
Okay.
Is there any interest in that at all? Because right now what we're doing is we're not going to take any cans, any recyclables from any of our people that we're elected to. And I'm sure you guys are getting questions, I hope.
So Rex, I don't know if you heard that I've been involved with multiple, meetings with people looking for potential solutions so that we can put together some sort of option for the board. I don't have an answer for you tonight. I'm not going to have one next week.
Can we have a meeting with Cal Recycle?
I've already got one scheduled.
So
if you want to participate in that, that's fine. I've already got one scheduled with them.
Then why did McGuire ask for me to ask for one?
I have no idea. I'm going to be talking with McGuire's office tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Okay. Then everything's fine.
Okay.
Sweeney. You are muted, Michael.
Yeah, the siren was going off, so I thought I'd mute, but I forgot. So a couple of things. One, yes, as Jill mentioned, in 1986, when CRV was established, there really wasn't, I think, any curbside recycling programs. So that was kind of the spear point of trying to get people to incentivize recycling, reduce the litter that often is a byproduct of that. But the weak link in all of this, in our discussions, is this, the fact that the product, the market price for the product does not cover the costs of picking the can up in one hand and reaching for a nickel in the other and giving it to the customer. And that seems, pretty much out of our control. And just overhearing some of the groups that Jill has talked to about coming here and setting up satellite collection facilities. I mean, if they're supposed to redeem the deposit value out of pocket and then recoup that by selling it to a market that is, has collapsed basically, I don't think it's going to work. So it's not like we're not interested and are just shining people on with respect to CRV as much as it is, given the current market conditions for, CRV products. It costs more, as Jill again mentioned, to redeem it than the actual deposit itself. I mean, if we were to say spend $10,000 a day returning deposits to people, customers, and then could send a bill to Cal Recycle, who would send us $10,000, then that might work. But to put it on a truck and then drive it somewhere to sell it at a depressed price, only to realize that, you know, we spent much more money processing and redeeming and shipping and selling than we, you know, we're not able to recoup the cost. So I just, you know, that seems like a real difficult obstacle or weak link or Achilles heel or whatever you want to talk about that. So I'm certainly interested in, you know, if Jill decides that, you know, to engage in a conference call with Cal Recycle and McGuire and Rex, and I mean, I'm certainly available to participate in something like that. So I think, well, I would prefer letting Jill just move forward some of the scheduled discussions she has with our legislators and Cal Recycle, and then if she wants to make you know, it available to people like myself and Rex, then we can participate in that if that works for everybody. Are there any other comments? I would like to just say, Jill, thank you for your perseverance. You know, I mean, this is a real challenge. So
Yeah, it has been.
I appreciate your perseverance and just hanging in there.
So to conclude my staff report real quick, because I also know that we have somebody who's on the line. I want to let board members know that we've completely had you know, full resumption of the hours of the Eureka Recycling Center. So we're back open 7 days a week, and our hazardous waste facility is resumed residential drop-off for 6 days a week. So we're no longer doing those appointments for those residential customers, and it is on a first come, first serve. Small businesses are still required to schedule appointments when they're bringing their materials in. With respect to the wildlife fires, I know that Gary is on the phone, so he can answer, you know, any questions. First, because we were having materials stored on our site for, you know, potentially longer than our permitted holding time, we did submit a waiver request so that we would not be issued any sort of violations by the LEA and Cal Recycle. And this was a result of having to detour the traffic, the trucks over 299, stage in the Reading area, and then go up to Dry Creek. So we had some decrease of empty trailers that were available. Fortunately, a huge shout out to Dry Creek Landfill for all of their work. They were able to secure permission from Del Norte County Sheriff, in addition to Caltrans and Oregon Department of Transportation, so that they could send our trucks under escort through the closed Highway 199 while Caltrans and their contractors were able to clear off the down trees and some of the things there. So 199 was able to reopen on September 19th. And so it was, I think, 9 days closure total. We were able to get all of the material completely removed by September 21st. Bettendorf Trucking did it just a really amazing job of just, you know, getting us the trailers so we could get everything loaded and get it sent out. And which was really important. And one of the notes that I have in here, if board members haven't tracked it, I think it's an important thing for you guys to know that you know, our facility was designed to receive a pretty, you know, significant volume of material. However, because we are doing all these material diversion activities, like the mattress recycling and doing some of the manual diversion of metals and plastics and things like this, that activity takes up real estate, which means the functional available space that we would have to store material is reduced. So if we were needing to have longer holding times of that material, we would, number one, have to do away with those diversion activities temporarily. Then, of course, after 6 days of accumulated material, we would have to shut our doors to the public performing self-haul if we don't have trailers moving out. So our facility is increasingly being challenged with a combination of inbound material in addition to our diversion activities, because it all requires, real estate, floor space in order to safely manage all of that material. So it is something that when we say we are challenged in putting in additional diversion programs, it's a physical capacity issue. The other thing, of course, is what with all these great wildfires, we've got employees who are working outdoors, and we've had very unhealthy air conditions. So we, of course, have our facility has walls and a roof, but with the bay doors, you just have the free exchange of air. So we would, depending on the air quality index, make sure that people were rotating through and having the opportunity to get into clean air settings on a more frequent basis. Fortunately, what with COVID, everybody's wearing a mask anyways. So, that mitigation of wearing an N95 mask, well, they're all doing it now anyways. So that's good. So I think that up here today in Oric, I can't say what it was like in Eureka, but up here today, it's still pretty strong, smoky conditions. And so until we get hopefully a rain event, we're looking at having to operate our facility this way right now. And that concludes, I think, my ED report, other than I would just ask if Gary wants to add anything additional.
I would say if anybody knows Sheriff Apperson in Del Norte County and Kimmy Scott, who works in their emergency office of communications, those two worked really hard to make it possible for these trucks to go through. And so they're the ones who deserve the credit. So anyway, and staff was good to work with at HWMA, and so was Bettendorf. It's just one of those unique challenges that came up, and we made it through. But the wildfires, unfortunately, I think are going to be something of a natural disaster that we're going to be dealing with for years to come. We're seeing it all over the Pacific Northwest and California. So thank you for your patience.
Oh, and thank you. And also, so board members know, a lot of fire debris material will likely end up going over towards Anderson, but there's a possibility that some of that material will be going to Oregon as well, to Dry Creek. And so Gary went ahead and circulated around his flyer with their basic acceptance standards because they're having to revamp primarily for the city of Talent and Phoenix. And I've provided all of that information to the county LEA so that county staff has that information and can provide guidance to anybody who's having to make property debris cleanups here in Humboldt County. So thank you, Gary.
Okay. Well, let's see. The next item on our agenda is
Michael.
Yes.
I'm showing. So we are not going to have a meeting with two board members and McGuire and Cal Recycle. You guys will just keep going on and we can just tell people we're just not going to do it till something drops in our lap. I mean, that's the abridged.
I think we're working on trying to come up with a solution, and it's my understanding that Jill has a scheduled call with Cal Recycle. Is that correct, Jill? Next Monday, did you say?
No, the next Monday is a local task force. I'm actually not certain. I've got a meeting with McGuire's office tomorrow so that we could talk about scheduling a meeting with Cal Recycle and Woods' office. That was the purpose of the meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, okay. So,
and if board members want to attend that, obviously not a quorum of board members, that's fine.
So yeah, I think Rex would like to attend that. I would be interested in attending that.
Okay.
So if you can let us know. And yeah, I mean, I don't think we've I mean, it appears and sounds like we've given up and closed shop, and but it's a challenging situation, and we're continuing to search for a viable solution.
Then all I'd ask for is more. I mean, I don't think we have anything on our HWMA page about this, or very little. I think it would be nice if we went on our HWMA page and says, for the foreseeable future, which is a probably accurate statement, we will not be collecting any CRV buyback, and you can just drop it off or put it in your curbside recycling or take it to Crescent City or something like that. But I mean, I think the people should know that, because it's getting, some of these people have their garages full with cans of stuff, and the mother load ain't coming through for them. So
yeah. Well, I certainly think that's a good idea. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Is that something we can
put
do,
something
Jill?
out? I know that you put the letters out to McGuire and Woods, and I talked to McGuire about the letter, but the pilot, they still throw the pilot program back in our face, but I guess they don't understand that the pilot program won't work for us in that aspect.
So I will ask Tyler real quick. I know that he recently updated the website, and make sure that it's just more explicit than what you already have on there, Tyler.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the next item on our agenda is a closed session. The intention of the board of directors to meet in closed session for one item, and that's the public employee performance evaluation for the position of executive director. So all participants in this meeting, with the exclusion of board members and legal counsel, will need to leave the meeting or will be blocked.
Tyler is going to be removing everybody from the meeting, and then he is going to turn over the Zoom controls to myself. Right. That way we are all in here. Yes. If we run into any sort of technological difficulties, or not technical difficulties, I'm not going to have the ability to ask Tyler how to get back in. So the fallback plan that I would use is, I think I can get you guys set up through a separate Zoom invite, in which I would do that from the personal Zoom that I've got. So we can certainly do that. And so hopefully everything will go smoothly. Tyler, is there anything else that I missed?
I don't believe so. I am going to remove studio control from...
Before you do that, announce going in and ask whether or not there's any public comment on this agenda item before you go removing people from the...
Yeah, okay. So before we remove people, is there any public comment on the closed session topic? Seeing none, hearing none. So, Tyler, do you want to go ahead and exit everyone except the board and legal counsel and our executive director?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.